Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Willing, and I am an editor and poetry mentor here at Coffee House Writers. I'd like to welcome everybody to our very first video lesson on poetry. This week, we're going to talk about what poetry is and why it's important to us. I want to start with a little bit of a rundown of history of poetry, Poetry has been a part of humanity since the beginning of time. In fact, it's been around so long that we can't even trace the earliest work of poetry because it was spoken before it was written. The very first written piece of literature is the Epic of Gilgamesh, and as you know, this is a poem, an epic. Our ancient ancestors used poetry to make sense of the world around them. They wrote about gods and goddesses, battles between good and evil. Poetry for the ancient human was something that brought civilization together. It explained their belief systems, their roles in society, and answered the quintessential human question of existence. Why am I here? What does all of this mean? Jump a few hundred years into the future and we get the sonnet in the 13th century. Shakespeare refined this. And he questioned society and its rules, and explored emotion within the context of morality. Think of Romeo and Juliet, or Much Ado About Nothing. In the 15th century, poetry satire becomes popular, along with the Restoration poets. And this is where literary elites like John Dryden begin questioning the art of writing itself. And he also seemed to question, why do we take ourselves so seriously? In the 19th century, we have the Romantic poets, Wordsworth, Longfellow, Keats. All of these poets explored imagery and beauty, using language to appeal to the aesthetic. They questioned what beauty is and said, isn't the world beautiful? Isn't life beautiful? Even in its most saddened, agonistic self, there's beauty. But what does all of this tell us about what poetry is? Well, if you ask Google, poetry has a pretty simple definition. It's a noun, a literary work in which special intensity is given to the expression of feelings and ideas by the use of distinctive style and rhythm. But poetry is more than that. Mark Yakich of The Atlantic talks about the strangeness of poetry in one of his articles, and he questions its usefulness. He says, occasionally in a magazine or online you see one, with its ragged right edge and arbitrary-looking line breaks, and it announces itself by what it is not, prose that runs continuously from the left to right margins of the page. A poem practically dares you, not just to look, but to read. I am different. I am special. I am other. Ignore me at your own peril. Yakich describes poetry as this strange thing that somehow operates differently than anything else in the world. It's expressive, but so is prose. It's emotive, but so is TV, so is music. In fact, Yakich makes the argument that the things for which poetry is most known for, imagery, physical and emotional movement, tender reflections, he says these things are better done through other means: film, music, prose. A novel can give us imagery and a whole world to escape into. A movie can explore the same themes of life, morality, and death, but visually. Music gives us melody and rhythm at a level which poetry would never be able to compete. So, what makes poetry so special? What's the point? The word poem comes from the Greek word poema. This word literally translates to a thing made. So in ancient terms, a poet would be defined as a maker of things. But if this is true, then what exactly is the thing made? The answer? perception. Poetry differs from every other artistic form because it forces us to change our perceptions and preconceived notions about the world around us. It even forces us to change our own minds. Poetry makes us question, makes us think, makes us play around with our thought patterns and see things anew. Take this poem that looks at the sun, for example. It's called The Brave Man. It's by Wallace Stevens. The sun, that brave man, comes through boughs that lie in wait, that brave man. Green and gloomy eyes and dark forms of the grass, run away. The good stars, pale helms and spiky spurs, run away. Fears of my bed, fears of life and fears of death, run away. That brave man comes up from below and walks without meditation. That brave man. Now, in this poem, the sun is brave, but the person in the poem is afraid. The poem is speaking about the difference between a sun that always rises and sets and mankind, which thinks, feels, questions, and has the ability to fear. Now, before hearing this poem, maybe you did think about the fact that the sun always rises and sets regardless of where we are in the world or what's going on in our lives, but maybe you didn't. Maybe this is the first time someone has pointed out that the sun has no humanity, and maybe that makes you question what bravery truly is. That is the point of poetry. That is why we write it. It's about perception and also a connection to others. Poetry lets you show how you're feeling. It gives you the ability to express yourself and your thoughts. Your perception of the world around you is then shared in verse with the world. And when you read poetry, you're connecting to others, learning what it's like to think and feel from another's perspective. You can immerse yourself into the mind of someone else, introducing you to other ways of being, other ways of living, even to people from long ago. Keats seemed to embody this very concept with his poem, This Living Hand. It's a very unique poem because it was left unfinished, but I think that makes it even more perfect. He seems to be saying, in my words I live on, through you. This living hand, now warm and capable of earnest grasping, would, if it were cold and in the icy silence of the tomb, so haunt thy days and chill thy dreaming nights, that thou would wish thine own heart dry of blood, so in my veins red life might stream again, and thou be conscious calmed. See, here it is, I hold it towards you. That's the point of the poet, the maker of a strange thing which forces us to alter our senses and see the world anew. Express, relate, bring our perceptions to light and hold them out to others to perceive. Welcome to Week 1 Poet. I hold it towards you.